Good morning. It's Friday morning. Let me say, if you're looking for Thursday's devotion, there was not one on Thursday. I had a medical procedure. I went there early in the morning and I stayed there all day. And I'm fine, but I just want you to realize there was no Thursday devotion this week. So we're still at Revelation 20, verses 11 through 15, the end of the chapter. Then I saw a great white throne and him who was seated on it. From his presence, earth and sky fled away, and no place was found for them. And I saw the dead, great and small, standing before the throne, and books were opened. Then another book was opened, which is the book of life. And the dead were judged by what was written in the books, according to what they had done. And the sea gave up the dead who were in it. Death and Hades gave up the dead who were in them, and they were judged, each one of them, according to what they had done. Then death and Hades were thrown into the lake of fire. This is the second death, the lake of fire. And if anyone's name was not found written in the book of life, he was thrown into the lake of fire. Oh my goodness, the great judgment. What are we to do with this? In theological history, of course, this became quite elaborate, and you have things like hell with all of its levels, which mostly comes from Dante, but we think of it as that way, levels, and then in Dante you've got purgatory and then heaven, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But Calvin, for instance, thought that only a small percentage of the people in his churches would actually go to heaven, and most people were bound for hell because of what they did. And those in the Reformation particularly, who were so adamant that you're saved by grace, don't know what to do with this. Well, they were judged according to what they did. There's a small movement in our time, and it's always been there, and it's always been a small movement because it really goes against the teaching of the sort of the main teaching of the church, and that is a teaching that says everybody goes to heaven. Theologically, it's very consistent, even though some people find it very disagreeable to say that. There are simple books that work it out. Love Wins by Rob Bell is a good one. It's an easy book. You could read it in this afternoon. And then there's a much more difficult book called That All Might Be Saved by David Bentley Hart, which is a difficult book, but makes the argument that that the New Testament actually teaches this. It's just that the church has kind of grabbed a hold of something else early on and has never brought itself back to what the New Testament teaches. I'm going to leave all of that aside because I don't want to spend a great deal of time on it today. But here is one of the few passages that does talk about a judgment, and those whose names are not found written in the book of life are thrown into the fire. So you put the trash in the fire and it burns up. So you put the sinners in the fire and they burn up. In a way, that sort of fits the narrative here of Revelation. You have all this good versus evil, and good wins, and so the evil is just thrown away, thrown in the fire. And I think that's what's important. The other thing is, there are all these books, but then there's the book of life. And so if your name is in the book of life, you're okay. I mentioned purgatory a few minutes ago. In Dante's purgatory, the people that are in there are being tortured and find life very difficult. But they know that there is a hope of getting out of purgatory into heaven. And what that really means is that they're being sort of educated and trained and taught the spiritual things that they didn't get in their life on earth, um, they're learning in purgatory, and the the gold is being refined and the dross is being burned away, so that they'll be ready to enter the presence of God. Now that's a kind of a dogma that the church created, because the church had to face the issue: what do we do with people who are basically believers but aren't real good in their lives? Well, they have to learn somewhere, and probably it's after death they learn for some number of years or eons or whatever, and then they're admitted into God's presence. That's better than bliss or hell, and you just go one way or the other. I think it's a better idea to say that we get sort of trained for God's presence even after death. All of that is speculative, and we don't know the final answers at this point in our existence. What we can say, though, I think, is that those of us who believe and trust in Jesus, this life is not all there is. There's a future, and we know that future is coming, and we're going to learn about that future in the next chapter, and we'll be able to see what it is that that God is going to do with us. And so we'll see that this life is not all there is. That there is, life forever, if you will, and the presence of God. And so we can look at this life in that context and see that, this present suffering is okay, because the great reward, I guess we could say, is coming after. There's probably a lot more that I could say, and say much better if I had time to think about it, about some of these topics. If you're interested, I'll refer you to those two books. If you're not interested, or if you think that's crazy, don't worry about it. And we will look then in chapter 21, the last chapter of Revelation, starting tomorrow, where it talks about the new heaven and the new earth. And then there's some sort of ending. Well, that's not the last chapter. There's 22 chapters. The 22 is the ones with it has lots of endings. It ends and then it ends again. And, anyway, it's kind of like Beethoven, bum, 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 bum. We could never quite finish his symphonies. And same way with the Bible. So we will we'll get to all that in the next couple of days. And in the meantime, I warn you about this judgment and say to you, just trust Jesus and you will be okay. Have a great day.